Marcus woke up before sunrise, as he did most mornings. The sky was still dark when he slipped out of bed. He moved quietly so he would not wake his little sister, Zoe, who shared the small room across the hall. Their mother worked long hours at the local diner, and Marcus had learned early to take care of Zoe. Some mornings he made her breakfast. Other days he helped her with her homework at the kitchen table under the dim light of a single bulb. He liked that, liked knowing that Zoe counted on him and that he could help her start her day with a smile on her face. After breakfast, he walked the 2 blocks to school. The houses in his neighborhood were close together, and the sidewalks cracked from old tree roots. Some of the lawns had patches of dirt where grass would not grow, yet Marcus saw beauty everywhere. He noticed the bright red door on Mrs. Patel's house and the way Mr. Santos waved when he passed by. In class, Marcus was quiet. But he sat in the back row and listened. He took careful notes and asked questions when he needed help. His teacher said he was polite and respectful. They said he had potential. At lunchtime, Marcus joined a small group of friends under the old oak tree in the schoolyard. They talked about video games, sports, and the latest comic book adventures. Marcus laughed when his friend Jamal told a joke about a talking dog. He felt comfortable with them. He never felt the need to raise his voice or draw attention. Liked being quiet. He liked that people thought of him as calm, someone you could trust. After school, he often went to the community center. There, he helped younger kids with reading and art projects. He painted watercolors of sunflowers and shared his crayons with a boy who had none. The center's volunteers called him a role model. They said he was patient and kind. Marcus felt proud when the children smiled at his drawings or repeated a new word he taught them. It made him believe that small acts of kindness could matter. His mother, Latoya, returned home late in the evening. She smelled of coffee and fryer oil, but she always greeted Marcus and Zoe with a warm hug.
Oh.
She asked about their day and listened when Zoe chattered away about her favorite teacher. Then she turned to Marcus and asked about his classes. Marcus told her about math problems and the history book he was reading. He told her he hoped to get into the city's scholarship program so he could go to college. Latoya listened. She smiled. She knew he was a good boy. She knew he would work hard. One cool afternoon, as Marcus and Zoe walked home from school, they passed the corner convenience store. The bright neon sign flickered. A few people stood in line to buy snacks. Marcus heard a sudden shout. He saw a man bolt from the entrance, a dark bag in his hand. The clerk, a middle-aged woman, screamed behind the counter. 1 second the man was there. The next he sprinted down the street. People gasped and pointed. Marcus froze for a moment. Then he and Zoe hurried away, hand in hand, hearts pounding. They did not stop to watch. 2 days later, Marcus was at home when he heard a knock on the door. He opened it to find 2 police officers in their dark uniforms. His mother stood behind him, alarmed. One officer showed a badge and asked Marcus to step outside. His heart pounded so loud he could hear it in his ears. He asked what was wrong. The officer said there had been a robbery at the store down the block. The clerk said she saw his face, though it was too dark to be sure. She pointed to a photo lineup. She said she recognized him. The officer looked at Marcus as if he already knew the answer. Marcus blinked. He shook his head, tried to speak, but words would not come. He was led to the squad car, and his mother followed, calling his name. At the station, they sat in a small room with sad orange walls. The clerk and store manager sat behind a table. They described the robber's clothing and said they saw his face in the dim light.
Ow.
Marcus tried to explain that he was walking home with Zoe at that time. He told them Zoe would remember. He asked if they had checked with her. The officers frowned and said Zoe was too young to give a clear statement. Marcus felt the room spin. He looked at his mother, who squeezed his hand. She said she believed him. She promised to tell Zoe to come the next day. But that promise felt empty in the cold light of the station. The next morning, Zoe arrived at the station in her school uniform and hugged Marcus tightly. She told the clerk that the man had a limp and that his bag looked like her old backpack. She said she remembered the car parked near the curb. It was a bright blue sedan with a dent on the left door. Clerk and manager looked at Zoe, then at the officers. The manager frowned and whispered something to the clerk. The clerk cleared her throat and said they were sorry for the mistake. They said they would check the car's license plate, but they needed to see the store's security footage first. Weeks passed. The footage arrived, but it was grainy. The man's face was blurred. The car's dent was hard to see. The license plate numbers were unclear. Marcus's lawyer, Ms. Rivera, asked for a better image. She asked for any witness who could place Marcus at a different location when the robbery happened. The prosecution refused. They said the clerk's testimony was enough. They said Marcus's photo matched the blur on the video. They said he was the only suspect. The judge listened to both sides. She reviewed the images and the clerk's statement. She read Zoe's notes in the official report. She read Marcus's police record, which was empty. She read his school report, cards. She read his mother's letter asking for mercy. Then the judge made her decision. The courtroom was quiet when Judge Hayes spoke. Her voice was steady, calm. She said the evidence was enough to convict. She said the law left her no choice. She sentenced Marcus to life without parole under the state's 3 strikes policy, counting a past traffic offense as a strike. The gavel fell. It echoed in the room, loud and final. Marcus felt his world shatter. He looked at his mother and Zoe. They wept softly. His attorney looked stunned. The bailiff called for order as the gallery watched in silence, as Marcus was. Led away, his feet dragging, he glanced back at the courtroom. He saw Zoe's small form, clutching his mother's hand. He saw Ms. Rivera's eyes, filled with doubt and regret. He heard the judge's voice fade behind him, saying that justice had been served. Justice, the word felt cruel in his mind. Thought of his dreams of college, of helping Zoe with her homework. He thought of the kindness he had shown at the community center. All of it seemed to vanish with the judge's final words. The door closed behind him, the slate of his life. Once bright with promise, felt wiped clean of hope. Marcus stepped through the heavy iron doors and felt the world shift around him. The hallway was narrow, the walls a dull gray, and the air smelled of cleaning solution. Guards in dark uniforms led him by the arm, their faces blank. Whoa, he kept his head down, his heart pounding. Other boys lined the corridor, their eyes curious or cold. Some whispered, others stared in silence. Marcus tried to remember how long he had lived in his quiet neighborhood, helping Zoe with homework and dreaming of college. Now he was here, in a youth facility meant for hardened criminals. He swallowed hard and reminded himself that he was not like them. He was innocent. The cell they showed him was small. A narrow bed bolted to the wall with a thin mattress lay beneath a small barred window. Across from it was a stainless steel sink and toilet. A single harsh light bulb hung overhead. Marcus placed his few belongings, a worn backpack, a notebook, and a pencil on the bed. He traced the lines of the notebook cover with his finger, feeling the ridges beneath the paper. He thought of Zoe's laugh and his mother's proud smile. He told himself he would hold on to those thoughts. He could not give up. That first night, Marcus lay on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. Every sound felt loud, the metallic clang of a door, distant shouts, the echo of footsteps on concrete. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, counting each breath. In the dark, he heard the soft hum of a fan and the distant noise of other cells. He clutched his notebook to his chest and whispered a promise to himself. He would find a way out. Of this, he would clear his name. In the days that followed, Marcus discovered routines. Morning counted by the clang of a bell. Breakfast served in a noisy cafeteria where trays scraped tables and voices echoed. Classes in a bare room with a chalkboard and a strict teacher who counted attendance with a stern glare. Lunch and dinner followed the same pattern. Free time meant supervised yard hours with metal benches and concrete walls. He watched the other boys, learning who to avoid and who seemed kind. He kept his eyes open, his senses alert. He knew that survival here meant understanding each face, each rule. One morning after breakfast, an older inmate named Jerome sat beside Marcus. Jerome's face held lines that spoke of pain and time spent in many cells. He wore a faded denim jacket and a calm expression. He held a small paperback book in his hands, you knew, Jerome asked in a low voice. Marcus nodded.
Out.
Jerome introduced himself and offered the book a collection of poems. Marcus hesitated, but took it.
Helps to read when the walls close in, Jerome said. Marcus opened the
book and read a poem about hope and sunrise. The words felt gentle, reminding him of quiet mornings with Zoe under a soft sky. Over the next weeks, Jerome guided Marcus. He showed him which guard was fair and which one watched too closely. He taught him how to ask for extra blankets when nights were cold. He warned him about a few boys who liked to test newcomers. With Jerome's help, Marcus began to find small comforts. He sat at a bench by the yard fence during free time and wrote in his notebook. He described the sky he longed to see, the red door on Mrs. Patel's house, the old oak tree at school. Writing made him feel grounded. It reminded him who he was. Letters from his mother arrived regularly. Each one came folded in half and tucked inside an envelope stamped with hope. Latoya wrote about Zoe's school play, about the flowers in their small front yard, about her days at the diner. She told Marcus she loved him and believed in him. Marcus waited eagerly for each letter, kept them under his pillow, and read them again and again. He wrote back, describing his day, the people he met, the poems he read, and the classes he attended. He asked his mother to tell Zoe to keep drawing sunflowers. He asked her to give his love to Mrs. Patel and Mr. Santos. Writing letters felt like a lifeline or bridge between two worlds. One afternoon, Marcus learned that the facility now allowed phone calls to approved contacts. He listened as the guard explained the rules. 1 call per month, 10 minutes only, and only 2 people. On the approved list, Marcus's heart leaped. He had to ask for his attorney, Ms. Rivera. He found a sheet of paper and wrote the name carefully in block letters. He asked the guard when his call would happen. The guard said to wait. Marcus nodded, though inside he trembled with hope. A phone call might be his chance to share facts no one had heard. He imagined telling Ms. Rivera about the blue sedan, the limp, the voice he heard that night. That evening, Marcus lay on his bunk and stared at the bars, casting shadows on the wall. He thought of the day he first walked into the courtroom, the judge's calm voice, the final clang of the gavel. The word justice had felt hollow then. Now he clung to a new word, hope. He repeated it in his mind as he traced lines on the ceiling, imagining them turning into cracks that let in sunshine. He whispered the word until sleep took him, asleep, filled with dreams of freedom and a future where he could go to college, help Zoe, and live without fear. The next morning, Marcus woke with the same thought. Today could change everything. He folded his clothes neatly, washed at the sink with cold water, and waited in the yard until the guard called his name. His heart pounded as he stepped into the small room with the payphone. He raised his hand to the mouthpiece and felt a shiver of anticipation. Then he dialed the number he had memorized. His hand trembled as he held the receiver. "Miss Rivera?" he said, his voice low but steady. She answered, surprised. Marcus took a deep breath and prepared to speak the truth he had kept beneath the walls for so long. He was ready. Marcus felt his heart beat so fast he thought it might burst through his chest. He held the phone's receiver tight, and for a moment he heard only the faint buzz in the tiny room. Then a voice came through, warm and surprised. "Marcus? Is that you?" It was Ms. Rivera. Her tone carried relief, and that gave Marcus's courage. He took a steadying breath. He pictured her in her small office, her sharp eyes softening at the sound of his voice. "Yes," he said, "it's me." He paused, remembering every detail he had kept in his mind for weeks. He heard the judge's last words, the echo of the gavel, and the roar of silence in his family's faces. He thought of Zoe's small hand in his and the shape of the blue car's dent. He remembered the man's limp and the way the bag bounced as he ran. He steadied his voice. "I need you to listen," he said. "I have information about that night." Ms. Rivera's breath sounded sharp. "Go on," she said gently. Marcus pressed his free hand against the metal wall for support. He told her about the time of the robbery, about how he and Zoe left school late because Zoe stayed after for painting class. He described the street lights and how they cast long shadows on the pavement. He told her the clerk had spoken of a limp but said nothing about a silver ring on the suspect's finger. He told her the bag looked like Zoe's backpack, with bright yellow straps. He paused, waiting for her to speak. When no words came, he added the strongest detail. The car. The car was a bright blue sedan, he said, speaking slowly so there'd be no mistake. It had a dent above the left wheel, just like the one Mrs. Griffin's grandson parked in front of the store. Marcus had learned that Mrs. Griffin lived 2 blocks from the store and parked her grandson's car there during school hours. He remembered the late afternoon when he saw the same dent. He described the scratch and the way the bumper hung low. On the other end, Ms. Rivera scribbled furiously. Marcus could imagine the notepad she kept during trials, now filled with new lines. "Did the officers ever check that car?" he asked, her voice held growing alarm. "No," she admitted. "They never even looked. They focused only on the photo and the clerk's statement." Marcus felt a cold knot tighten in his chest. "They never asked if anyone saw the car elsewhere," he said. "They never checked the GPS records. They never asked Zoe how long." Silence followed. Then Ms. Rivera spoke, her voice urgent. "Marcus, this is big. I need to get these details into an affidavit. Can you write them down?" Marcus pulled a folded sheet of paper from his pocket and held it close to the receiver. "I wrote everything," he said. "I'll give it to you when I see you." He could almost see her nodding. She promised to file an emergency motion. To reopen the case? She said she would ask the judge to grant a hearing based on new evidence. Marcus pressed the phone back onto its cradle and saw the guard waiting outside the door. The guard nodded and walked away. Marcus stood there for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. He had done something no one expected. He had used his one call to change the story. He walked back to his cell, his legs feeling both shaky and strong. He placed his sheet of paper on his small desk and stared at the lines he had written. Later that day, during the afternoon yard time, Marcus sat on a concrete bench and watched the sky. He thought about the phone call and Ms. Rivera's promise. He thought of his mother's letters and Zoe's bright drawings. He thought of Jerome's poems about sunrise. For the first time since he arrived at the facility, he felt a spark of hope that burned brighter than his fear. He whispered a silent thank you to the world and decided that no matter what happened, he would keep telling the truth. That night, Marcus fell asleep with the paper under his pillow and the word hope in his mind. He dreamed of the courtroom, filled with light, of Zoe's smile, and of a judge listening with fresh eyes. He dreamed of walking outside again, under a sky that belonged to him. He knew the next steps would be hard, but in his heart he carried a new belief that one voice, even from behind bars, could shake the system and let justice find its way. ChatGPT said. The next morning, Marcus felt a chill of excitement and dread as he waited for the guard to call his name. He hugged the folded paper tight in his pocket. He knew Ms. Rivera had already filed the emergency motion. He could almost see the judge's face when she read the new details. In the yard, Jerome sat beside him and asked quietly how he slept. Marcus smiled and handed him a small folded note. Jerome read the lines and nodded, said words of encouragement. Before stepping away, Marcus watched him go and felt a surge of strength. He was not alone in this fight. Back in the courtroom, sunlight poured through tall windows and lit up rows of soft wooden benches. News cameras clustered at the back, their lenses trained on the door. Marcus sat beside Ms. Rivera at the defense table. His mother and Zoe sat behind him, Zoe's small hand reaching over to squeeze his. When Judge Hayes entered, she paused and looked across the room. Her eyes fell on Marcus, and for a moment she held his gaze with a quiet question in her face. Marcus nodded, letting her know he believed in justice. Ms. Rivera stood and spoke clearly. She laid out the new evidence. Marcus's account of seeing the blue sedan, the dent above the wheel, the man's limp, and the bag like Zoe's backpack. She asked if police had checked GPS records, and she showed the judge a police report that said no such check was ever done. She then presented Zoe's statement, signed and sworn, describing what she saw that night. As she spoke, Marcus noticed the prosecutor's shift in her seat. The prosecutor's face paled when she realized these. Facts had never been considered. A hush fell over the courtroom when Judge Hayes spoke. She said the new evidence could prove Marcus's innocence and that the state had a duty to seek truth. She ordered a pause in the original conviction and directed police to investigate the blue sedan and the GPS data. She set a new hearing date. Cameras flashed as she left the bench. In that moment, Marcus felt the walls of his cell crack. Justice was breathing new life into his case. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed. Porters knocked on the defense table, asking Ms. Rivera for comments. She explained that Marcus's single phone call had revealed crucial facts. She called him brave. News outlets ran the story that night. A quiet teen behind bars for a crime he did not commit, cleared because of one phone call in his memory. Social media lit up with hashtags calling for reform of eyewitness testimony and better checks by police. In living rooms and dinner tables across the state, people talked about how one voice could bring down a flawed system. Meanwhile, police officers knocked on Mrs. Griffin's door to ask about her grandson's car. They compared the dent and recorded the GPS data from the car's onboard system. It showed the car was parked 2 blocks away at the time of the robbery. They spoke with neighbors who heard a man with a limp speak urgently that night. As facts came together, the story unraveled the prosecution's case. Even the clerk who made the initial ID signed an affidavit admitting her mistake. She said the dim light and stress had clouded her view. She expressed regret and asked the court to forgive her error. On the day of the new hearing, Marcus stood in the hallway outside the courtroom with his mother and Zoe. He felt his knees tremble, but Zoe wrapped her arms around his waist. Latoya brushed his hair back and whispered that she loved him. Arrived with a small bouquet of paper flowers, Zoe's drawings folded into shapes. He handed them to Marcus with a nod. Marcus held the flowers and breathed in the hope they carried. When the bailiff called his name, he walked into the courtroom feeling stronger than ever. Inside, Judge Hayes reviewed the new police report, the clerk's affidavit, and the GPS records. She looked at Marcus and saw a young man whose life had been paused by a mistake. She spoke slowly and firmly. This conviction is fundamentally flawed. I hereby vacate the sentence and order the immediate release of Marcus Thompson. The words rang through the room. Marcus blinked, his heart pounding. He heard Zoe giggle behind him and felt his mother's tears on his shoulder. The bailiff led him forward to remove the shackles. The weight he had carried for weeks fell away with every step. As Marcus stepped outside the courthouse, sunlight warmed his face. Cameras and onlookers cheered softly, giving space for a family reunion. Zoe ran forward and hugged him. Marcus wrapped his arms around her and held her tight. His mother stood behind, tears sliding down her cheeks. Jerome stood to the side, nodding with pride. Marcus looked up at Judge Hayes one last time. She offered a small, respectful bow. In that moment, Marcus knew things had changed not only for him, but for everyone who believed in fairness. His one phone call had sent ripples through the system and proved that truth, spoken bravely, could bring justice to light. Marcus woke before dawn again, but this time the sky was not dark and heavy with fear. It was soft gray, like a new page waiting to be filled. He lay in his own bed, in his own home, and for a moment he felt as if he could reach out and touch the sunlight. He sat up and looked around the small room he shared with Zoe. Her bed was empty, but he could almost see her there, hugging her favorite stuffed rabbit. He smiled and whispered a quiet thank you to the world. He dressed quickly and went to the kitchen. His mother was already there, pouring coffee. She turned when she heard the creak of the door and hugged him gently. "Good morning, baby," she said. "Ready for your first day back?" Marcus nodded, though his heart fluttered. He was both excited and nervous. He had changed so much. In the past weeks, he had nearly lost his life to a mistake, and then he had won it back. Now he was about to walk into a world that felt both new and familiar. Zoe came in, rubbing her eyes. She bounced forward and hugged Marcus. He lifted her onto the counter and kissed her forehead. She chattered about school, about painting class, and about her friends. Marcus listened and laughed. He told her about his own first day at the community college. He said he would be in a simple history class and that he might join the drama club. Zoe's eyes widened. You in drama? She asked, amazed. Marcus shrugged. He said he wanted to try new things. Zoe smiled and said she would come watch. His first play one day, after breakfast, they drove to the campus. Marcus saw shining windows and green lawns and students carrying backpacks. He felt a swirl of memories of those dark halls where he slept on a thin mattress and those hard benches where he wrote by hand. He breathed deeply and reminded himself that he was safe now, hugged his mother and Zoe, and walked into the building. The hall smelled of dust and fresh paint. Posters on the walls spoke of clubs and events. He found his classroom, took a seat, and opened the book. His pen felt different in his hand, as if it carried a promise. Over the next weeks, Marcus settled into a new routine. He attended early classes, helped his classmates with notes, and joined a student group for justice reform. He spoke at a small meeting where he told his story. How one phone call and one person's willingness to listen had changed everything. His voice was calm but firm. He saw nods of understanding and heard soft applause. In those rooms, filled with young faces, he felt he could make a difference. He felt he belonged. At home, his mother and Zoe welcomed him each evening. They made simple dinners together and sat on the front porch under the warm sun. Marcus helped wash dishes and folded laundry. He listened as Zoe read her favorite storybooks aloud, her small voice full of joy. He wrote letters to Ms. Rivera, updating her on his classes and the new friends he made. He thanked her again and again. He knew he owed her more than he could ever say. One afternoon, Marcus visited Judge Hayes's chambers. He knocked gently and entered when the judge called his name. The room was large and silent, with tall bookshelves and a heavy desk. Judge Hayes stood and greeted him with a soft smile. She gestured to a chair beside her desk. Marcus sat and waited, and the judge spoke. Marcus, you have shown true courage. I invited you today because I want to offer you something special. Marcus's heart beat fast. She handed him a letter from a scholarship committee. It said they would cover his tuition for 2 years if he maintained good grades and volunteered. In his community, Marcus blinked. He read the words again and again, his eyes filled with tears. He looked up at the judge. Thank you, he whispered. Judge Hayes said she had been moved by his story, and by the way he had used his experience to help others. She said she believed in second chances and in young people who fight for what is right. Outside the courthouse, Marcus felt as if he floated. He held the scholarship letter in his hand like a treasure. Zoe ran to him and he lifted her up. She said, "Big brother, you did it." He laughed and hugged her. His mother snapped a photo of them, all smiles in the warm light. He knew he would keep this moment forever. In the evenings, Marcus volunteered at the same community center where he once helped younger kids. He taught them to read and to dream. He shared his story, reminding them that even when life feels unfair, there are people who will listen. He urged them to speak up, to tell the truth, and to never give up hope. The children looked at him with wide eyes and listened eagerly. Some asked questions. Others drew pictures of blue cars and sunny days. Marcus smiled and answered each one. As months passed, Marcus felt stronger, balanced studies, volunteer work, and family time. He planned to transfer to the city university next semester. He and Zoe often sat on the front steps, talking about their dreams. Hers to be an artist, his to be a lawyer who fights for justice. He promised to help her every step of the way. She nodded and leaned against him. On the anniversary of his release, Marcus and his family returned to the courthouse. They walked through the same doors, not as guilty and accused, but as survivors and champions. Judge Hayes waited and greeted them with hugs. They took photos together, the judge and the family, all standing in front of the bench. Cameras captured the moment, but Marcus knew the true picture lived in his heart. That night, as he lay in bed, Marcus thought of the long road he traveled. He remembered the harsh lights of his cell, the echo of his own voice on the phone, and the day the judge vacated his sentence, he thought of Zoe's drawings, his mother's letters, and Jerome's poems. He thought of Ms. Rivera, who never gave up, closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Then he smiled and drifted into a peaceful sleep, knowing his life had new promise and that he would spend it making sure others could find hope too.